This is the When Work Isn't Work podcast. This podcast exists to help people reignite the love of what they do in a post-pandemic world. The pandemic gave us a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reflect on what is truly important to us in work and in life. I'm your host, Sinead Connolly, co-founder and director of Lotus People, an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency. We hope you enjoy today's chat.
We are recording. So hi, everyone. I am joined today by Dr. Margie Warrell, best-selling author, podcaster, TEDx speaker, and global authority on living bravely. Margie is a passionate keynote speaker and well-versed on the topics of leadership, courage, and living a full life. I am so excited about this conversation, and I hope everyone enjoys it too. So Margie, welcome.
Well, it's great to be with you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for joining me all the way from the US. We're making the time zones and remote working work for us. This podcast, it's been created to speak with individuals who love what they do. And for me, from where I'm sitting, you encapsulate passion and purpose in your career. So to set us off, could you share with our listeners your role and your career as it sits today?
Oh, yeah. Well, the journey to where I am today is anything but linear. So I'm currently working. I'm a senior partner at Korn Ferry in their CEO and board practice, and working a lot with basically CEOs, boards, and people at the very top level of leadership in pretty big companies. But my journey here has been really very global. I'm currently based in DC, but you can probably tell my accent is not American. I grew up in the Aussie bush, have lived around the world, Papua New Guinea and Singapore and in the UK, and spent the last 25 years really not working for an organization at all, but working for myself, because I was raising 4 kids, moving continents while raising kids, supporting husband in his career, and doing coaching and speaking and writing. But yes, you're right. I've been very purpose-driven for a long time, since probably my late 20s, when I just decided I didn't want a career in corporate marketing. Went back to school, studied psychology, then trained in coaching, and then tried to figure out how do you actually make a living and get paid doing what you love, which is probably part art and part science. And, 2 steps forward, 4 steps back. But here I am, because I think there's something to be said for, if you pursue what you feel a strong sense of passion and purpose around, and you're open to taking feedback and looking at your failures and going, well, what is it I'm not doing that I could be doing better, and what is it I'm doing that's really not landing, and continually tweak. It's not just about being passionate, but being smart. I think over time you get rewarded for that hard work. And frankly, also, I talk a lot about being brave, but being brave too, and risking a lot of rejection and failure along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that is the $1 million question. How do we make a living from doing what we love? And I think what's so impressive about your career is, as you've described, it hasn't been linear. It has been trying different things and going in different directions. And I think that is something that a lot of people can look to, because we are told from a very young age, the societal sort of influences that we are to get into a career and climb the ladder and kind of have these very conventional steps along the path of life. And I don't think that is the case. And I think there's fewer people out there like you who have kind of taken full ownership of what their career looks like and how that's going to be shaped. And I'm really interested in what you said about the art versus the science of figuring that out. If somebody was kind of thinking about a more unconventional career, probably in inverted commas or in bubble quotes, what advice would you give them to even start down that path?
Well, firstly, I would say, if there's something that's really calling to you, you're feeling like going off on a path less traveled, heed that calling. Like it's there for a reason. If there's something that really speaks to you, and you know what, there's some saying, I can't remember who wrote it, but don't go where the path leads, forge your own. So sometimes we look for other people and we kind of go, well, I want to do what they're doing, but sometimes we're called to do things and there is no one that's doing what we want to do or in the way that we want to do it, which I feel like that's been me. Like there's been no one I've said, I want to be exactly like that. It's been, that doesn't fit with my life and my circumstances. But I would also say, talk to a lot of people and be really open about learning, and don't get so wedded to a particular way of doing it or a particular path of what it looks like. I always think it's about a destination it's about a direction, not a destination. And I remember when I went back in my late 20s to study psychology, I had no idea where that would lead me. I knew I probably really wasn't going to be a psychologist, but at the time it was the only thing that I knew. I was reading, devouring all these like personal development books and written by psychologists and psychiatrists, and they really spoke to me. I'm like, I want to work in this area, but I didn't know what that would look like. I just knew this area, this direction was something that was of real interest to me. I found really valuable. And then as I've gone along, you know, like doors have opened, some doors have opened, and some doors that I really wanted to open did not open. And so it's like, okay, well, if the doors keep closing on me, maybe the universe is saying, like, look around you. Maybe there's some, you know, pivot, look in another direction. You can still use your talents and your gifts, but maybe you're just banging on the wrong door right now. There's a term in coaching. It's like, don't try and force an outcome. Like sometimes we get really attached to like, this is how it has to be. Like maybe that's not meant for you. Maybe those things that are missing you actually aren't meant for you, but something else is. And I can tell you, I would never in a million years have thought that I would end up doing the work that I'm doing now at Korn Ferry, which is arguably one of the world's largest sort of talent development company. They do executive search and placement, but they do huge advisory practice, 4,000 or 5,000 people working in helping organizations. How do we help people do their best work? How do we help organizations create the conditions for people to do their best work and add value, obviously, for stakeholders? But, you know, I wouldn't have thought to do this and be part of that. But honestly, I think the universe was conspiring for me to help leaders at the very top of the world's biggest companies to lead better. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm just going to say yes to that opportunity, and I'll be here as long as I feel like it's the right place for me to be. And if it's not, I'll leave. You know, it's like I don't think there's ever a final port of call. We can continually keep asking ourselves, is where I am right now where I want to be staying and moving in the future? And I think sometimes people get kind of pushed along by inertia. You know, they're doing what they're doing because that's what they've been doing, versus going, is the direction I'm headed really inspiring to me? And if it's not, well, what would have to be tweaked or utterly changed for me to feel really inspired by my future? Or how could I even do what I'm doing today in a way that's more meaningful and I feel a greater sense of purpose at it?
Yeah, completely. And I think exactly what you said about the universe being in flow, there's an element of surrender that I think if we want to maximize and kind of fully feel like we are aligning with the universe, we do have to surrender to that. If you're white knuckling something and gripping on, it often isn't the thing that comes to fruition in the way that it's meant to. So I definitely would agree with that. And I think the inertia that you've described, the pandemic, as we touch on that and speak about kind of what has been a huge event that has affected entirely the way that we work and how we work. That has been a big cause for people to say, do you know what, I have been moving with inertia. I have been in a place where I've been perhaps stagnant or just mindless, maybe is a better word than stagnant. I think many people were just kind of on the kind of hamster wheel of life without really taking a step back. And I think what the pandemic allowed us to do was to take a step back and really look at where things have fallen. And that's what we're seeing as a recruitment agency. We are seeing individuals really assess what's important to them on the back of having that much time to reflect and to really look at kind of how they're living their life. And it's a unique experience. And I find it quite inspiring because it isn't an experience that we would get. It's very rare that we would get to have the opportunity to press pause on life and really look forward and get our ducks in a row. Throughout that experience, is there any lessons or anything that kind of came up for you that was surprising that you actually will be carrying through?
I think you talked about something earlier about surrendering. And I think people often misunderstand what that means. It's like sitting back on your couch waiting, for the doorbell to ring and your dream opportunity or dream person to just rock up. And I think it's not about that. It's about working hard toward a meaningful pursuit and a meaningful aspiration. But this is easier said than done, but letting go of how it's all supposed to unfold. Surrendering your attachment to how that's all supposed to land. And I think that term surrender, I think about people who are tugging at a tug of war. It's like, I'm pulling this way and you're pulling that way. Surrender is just letting go of the rope. It's not me winning or you winning. It's just, I'm just not pulling. I'm working hard every day, but I'm also just sitting in a place of wonder and curiosity and going, well, I wonder what might happen here. Like, won't this be interesting versus it being good and bad? It's like, okay, interesting feedback. What can I take from that? And then take that into what I'm doing so I move forward more wisely. And it's not about going faster and faster and faster all the time. That said, I think, that word hustle, you hear about that word hustle if you're an entrepreneur or a business owner. There is a certain amount where it's like, get out there and, you need to sometimes knock on doors or you need to be sending emails and following up. And there's a certain level of hustle involved and go, well, that's just part of what it is to put energy into something and build connections and make sure people know about who you are and what you love to do. And one of my favorite sayings is, it's not what you know and it's not who you know, it's who knows what you know.
Yeah.
Like, who knows what you know? Who knows what it is you love to do? Who knows what it is you love to do more of? Who knows what you're passionate about? It's not just enough for people to know you, but do they know who you want to be in the world and what you want to do? And the more people who know what it is you want, the more they can help you get what you want. But you've got to be out there, not promoting yourself, but promoting the value that you've brought and that you want to bring more of. And I think by sometimes shifting that lens away from like self-promotion to, no, I'm really passionate about X. I love making impact Y, and I'm looking for opportunities in this domain to do more of it. And I would love any support you could give me. It's a really different conversation. It's a different emotion, a feeling that goes with it. And I think it lands a lot better too.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And it resonates so much because I think what you were touching on around the need to surrender as a type A personality, as many people listening will be kind of drivers and want to take action and move things forward. It's such a delicate balance to have that hustle, as you say, or that action that is required. And it's action in the form of energy. Energy needs to be created around something that you want to achieve. But with regards to the surrendering, you need to, if you push too far with that, and it becomes a stage of being too tightly wound into something, then you're not really letting things flow. So it's a very tricky balance, and it's something that I think as you hone your intuition, as you hone your gut, as you have that ability to picture what it is you want and to manifest that, creates, it can create an amazing experience. But it's a tricky line. It's not just a magic wand effect.
Look, I know, and I think, I think that word energy is really, really important word. Let's face it, we love to be around people that exude positive energy, that exude passion, that exude purpose, that exude enthusiasm and are positive. And even when the chips are all down, can find some humor and make us laugh when, things have completely gone, pear-shaped. And I think none of us are like that all the time. I'm not like that all the time. My kids will tell you, Mum's not like that all the time. My husband will say, I'm not like it all the time. But I really try and recharge and renew, which is probably where, when they see me at home and I'm like, I don't want to get out of my pajamas today, which is actually not that often. But so that I can go back into the world with the energy that I want to spread onto others. And if you're not showing up as someone that you would want to be around, then you need to step back, renew, recharge, reset. Maybe you need to reimagine the future that you're moving towards so that you are more inspired. And, that word inspire comes from the Latin, which is like spirit within, or to breathe life within. And, if you're not feeling alive, if what you're doing isn't making you feel alive, okay, sure, you might be tired at the end of the day, but you feel alive by doing it, then honestly, what is life about if it's not feeling positive about how we spend our hours and our days? And I see too many people kind of stuck in that. You talked about mindlessness, just going through the motions, pushed along by inertia in autopilot. In fact, Sainsbury's in the UK did a study a few years back, and they found that 97% of respondents said every day at least some of what they're doing was in autopilot. You get in your car, you drive to work, you don't even think about how you got there. You're just going through the motions. And while that allows us to be functional in many ways, you don't have to put too much brain energy into how to get into your car, turn it on, drive like you did when you started driving. We can, if we're not mindful, get pulled into going along in default mode, in autopilot mode. And our wiring is such that we can live our lives going along the path of least resistance in autopilot. We're not miserable. We're not necessarily depressed. We don't necessarily hate our lives, but we don't love our lives. We're not feeling lit up. And, the research shows that in order for us to feel alive, we have to be doing something that's meaningful. We have to feel like we're growing. We have to be stretched in some way. And if you haven't felt stretched for a long time, if you're not feeling like you're growing in some way, if it's not meaningful to you, then, you've got to ask yourself, what I'm getting from staying where I am on my current path worth what I'm giving up? And as I wrote in my book, You've Got This, making a change is uncomfortable. But if you don't trust yourself to take that leap, you can find yourself 5 and 10 years from now looking back going, my God, I wished I'd made that change at 25 or 30 or 35 or 40 and not at, the age I am now. So I would just say to people yes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, but the second best time is today. So don't feel like it's too late. Just make that change.
Make it happen. And I think if the last 2 or so years have taught us anything, it's that we are adaptable as a species. We can adapt, we can iterate, we are resilient, and we can make these huge changes. So I totally agree. And you've so beautifully articulated the premise of the drive behind wanting to create this podcast, which is supporting and inspiring, hopefully, individuals to really kind of shake things up after the last few years, and anyone who is feeling in a rut, giving them that inspiration to take a different direction. I want to touch on your studies and your interest within the kind of dynamic between leadership and courage. You've touched on it now as we've spoken. The two go hand in hand naturally. I set up my recruitment agency when I was 26. I was terrified. I've been called a fearless leader, and it doesn't resonate with me. I don't believe I'm fearless. I'm constantly terrified, but my comfort zone keeps expanding. Things that would have terrified me 7 years ago are very, very different to the things that terrify me today. And I keep taking action within that. You've obviously dedicated a lot of your career and your work to speaking about courage. How did you discover that this area was a passion? What led you to this particular topic?
Because I was just scared all the time, and I had so much self-doubt. And I think I wasn't able to articulate it as such in my 20s. I was in my 30s before I sort of realized I had 4 young kids. I'd moved to the United States just after 9/11 with 3 kids, and then I had a 4th child. And I knew I wanted to pursue a whole new career path. And I was sort of like, I knew I wanted to do coaching, and I knew the general, as I said, the general direction. And a year or 2 in, a few people said, oh, you should write a book. I did these. I still had this Live Bravely newsletter that anyone can sign up for on my website. And someone said, Margie, you should write a book. And the voice in my head was, who do you think you are to write a book? I went to a school that had like 15 kids in the whole school. I was the only kid in my grade growing up, in a really rural area. And I remember just thinking, well, if I was going to write a book with 4 kids at that point under 7, what would it be about? Like, what would be the thread? I had all these key things that a lot of people talk about. And I realized the thread that runs through my whole life story, including challenges I've had, tragedies that I've had to deal with and loss and suffering and struggle, and my own aspirations, has been a courage to trust myself, courage to defy my self-doubts, courage to believe that even in the worst of times, the future can be good, and courage to take ownership for the crap that wasn't working and say, okay, this is on me. It's not everyone else. It's not my parents' fault. It's not the world's fault. This is me to take ownership. And you know what? And I think that was that point, probably 20 odd years ago, that I just, that clarity, that it started like, it's courage. And that's because I just have struggled so much with that little voice of doubt and that fear. And what if you fail? And what will people think? And you're not that good. And, all of those little negative, that inner critic has been well and truly alive and well in the back of my head. And so, and yet as I've traveled and lived around the world, I've met so many people who, maybe they've obviously had different experiences than me. They might have slightly different challenges than me, but that fear factor is what locks them in. It's like a prison, invisible jail cell. Their lives are constricted by that fear, and courage is what it takes to go, I'm terrified I'm going to fall short. I'm terrified I don't have what it takes. I really hate the idea that people might criticize me and disapprove or reject me, but I am not going to let my fear of what I don't want hold the power to keep me from going after what I do want. And it's a moment it's a decision. And I'm still my stomach's still knotty and I'm nervous as hell, but I'm just so clear that I do not want to look back one day and ask myself, what if I had tried? What if I tried? And I think I remember that with that first book going, I don't know if I can write a decent book. It was a fine book. Clearly, I'm not a household name. I'm not J.K. Rowling. I wasn't born, I don't have I'm not a literary genius or anything, but I felt so called to do it. And it opened the door to bigger doors and bigger doors. And while it wasn't everything, it opened the door to whole new things. And so courage is what it takes to take that first step, and then the second step, and then the third step. But I would just say to everybody, take that first step. I really believe, Aristotle said it. I think Churchill said it, courage is the virtue that makes all others possible. And I think unless we're willing to defy our fear and self-doubt, we can spend our lives living in a very restricted circle of our own potential and the possibilities that actually life holds for us, if only we're brave.
Absolutely. I'm nodding for anyone who's listening to the audio rather than seeing the visual. I'm just nodding in agreement with everything you're saying. And I think what really lands for me is that courage is rewarded. And I have seen that through my own career, my own battles with imposter syndrome, and kind of just navigating my way in the business world as a leader and of a successful business, kind of taking that from idea and seed stage all the way through to kind of running a business. And that fear is definitely something that I contend with regularly. But again, as you've spoken about, when you overcome it, it is so rewarding, and it really does put you in a very strong position to experience life to the fullest, which I think is what we all would like to aim to do. Finally, for anybody who is struggling with imposter syndrome or self-doubt or backing themselves within their careers, what piece, as well as being courageous, of course, what piece of advice would you share with them as a starting point?
Well, imposter syndrome, and I've written about this a lot. I think I've got some articles on my blog, and in my book, you've got this, I've written about it too. But for anyone struggling with imposter syndrome, I just say the real imposter is the voice in your head that's saying, people are going to find out. That's what who the real imposter is, not you. But I want you to know you're not alone. There are so many extraordinary people, like Jodie. I mean, think of Kate Winslet, who I think is one of the most extraordinary actresses, saying she was wondering, if people were going to say, hey, give back the award, whatever it was. I can't remember. There are so many people throughout history who are incredibly accomplished, who have this underlying fear that at some point people realize they're not as good as others think. And I think the more skilled and masterful we are in any particular domain, the more susceptible we are to it in that domain, because Kate Winslet knows what absolute mastery of acting is, and so she measures herself against the best of the best of the best. And for me, in the realm of personal and professional development, that's where I'm like, oh, but I know how much I don't know. And so I would just say, stop making negative comparisons and comparing what you don't know about something with every genius ever combined in history knows about it. What you haven't done with what someone has done that's 20 years ahead of you in your career. Stop comparing your weaknesses with others' strengths, because they're probably looking at you going, oh my gosh, if only I was as good or creative or strategic or XYZ as you. And just really focus on running your own best race and be very, very decisive and clear not to let that fear of being found out keep you from putting yourself out there in ways that do expose you to being found out, because it's only when you dare to do the things that would put you at that exposure that you realize, you know what, I am worthy and I can do this. And you know what, there's a lot of other people out here who are feeling the same as me. I think women can sometimes struggle with it a little bit more than men, but men do as well. And I have it regularly. And now I sort of just recognize when I have these moments and someone singing my praises and saying something and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much I don't know. I just go, Margie, focus on all you do know. You have things to say that are of value. Focus on what you do know and what you can do, and just say thank you, shut up, and don't let the fear call the shots.
Yeah, no, fantastic advice. And I think perfectionism is the thing that we strive for, many of us strive for. And that's when those things kick in, because perfectionism isn't attainable. It can't be achieved. And it isn't something to try to aspire to, because it's going to make your life tricky.
Absolutely. And I think, Sinead, that a lot of people, particularly women, struggle with that. We have, like I just talked about, negative comparisons with other people or who we think where we should be. It's a negative comparison. We have this perfectionist bar and we go, well, I should be X, Y, and Z. And no one is all things all the time. And I think we focus on the gap versus the gain. We focus on what we're not good at, or what we haven't done, or what we haven't nailed, versus what we did nail. I mean, if you've ever had any negative feedback or criticism, you could have 100 people saying you're brilliant, but one person says, oh, you weren't great. And we sit there and we ruminate on it and go, you know what, 100 people thought I was good. Focus on the 100 people. But just recognizing we all have, many of us have that bias towards the deficits and the gaps and what we haven't mastered or what we're not perfect at. And we do ourselves a busy disservice, but I would say more so, we do the world a huge disservice. We shortchange everyone around us of who we could be. And so it's not just about you not being as successful as you would like. It's that you are shortchanging everyone who would be lifted and who would benefit from all that you have to bring. And so if you just take the focus off yourself for a minute and get the ego out the way, because our egos are always going to be sitting there chipping away on us, but focus on, what is the impact I want to make? And I actually wrote a book called Make Your Mark, because it was like, if you were focused on making your highest point of contribution, of making your biggest mark, and you gave yourself permission not to be perfect as you move forward, but just to give the best you could on any given day, how would that shift the energy you bring and allow you to get out of your own way and just get on with making the best of every situation, including the ones when, you feel knocked down and you go, well, that didn't land very well, and going, well, what is there for me to learn from this? Because if you're being brave, you're going to fall. You're not always going to nail it. But even every fall holds a gift to learn something. Sometimes we need to learn humility, but sometimes it's just something we need to build our resilience and our skills. And if it was easier to achieve great things, then they wouldn't be so meaningful anyway. It's in the striving and the picking ourselves up and moving forward that actually what we ultimately achieve is so much more meaningful.
Absolutely. We're then living the full human experience, warts and all, rather than keeping ourselves safe and off to one side and not experiencing everything. So I totally agree. Margie, thank you so much for your time. I'm so grateful. I was scribbling away with all of the notes and the wisdom that came from that conversation, and I'm sure everyone else will absolutely relish it as well. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. It's a pleasure to be with you. And thank you, everybody. Please connect with me on social media or my website. I'd love to stay in touch.
Absolutely. Thank you.
This podcast is sponsored by Lotus People Recruitment. We are an award-winning Sydney-based recruitment agency with a genuine human-first and innovative approach. Lotus People are disrupting the recruitment industry by placing quality and service at the heart of all we do. Recruiting roles across HR, talent, business support, and much more. Head to our website today for more information if you are a job seeker or an employer hiring staff. We're at lotuspeople.com.au.